Hey everyone, Adam with Aeroworks Productions. Today we're going to be covering the new DJI Phantom 4 and we're excited to do a review on this one. A couple things before we get started. One, all the reviews that we do them because we love the hobby. We're also commercial operators and we fly all this equipment. We buy them ourselves. People don't send them to us. We're not claiming to be gurus or, you know, slap a kiss on the wife for me and all that kind of stuff. The reviews that we do are real reviews by experienced pilots that have been flying these things for many, many years, 25 years in the hobby, and pretty much in the beginning since the UAV market really came about in the consumer market. So the reviews that we do are real reviews. We're not being paid to do these reviews. We go out and we buy these drones just like you guys do. So with that in mind, let's get started. Today we have the DJI Phantom 4. This is a really anticipated drone for 2016, and we know there's a lot of competition in this space. Let's go ahead and get started. We're not going to do a full unboxing. We'll go ahead and get it opened up and we'll just talk about what's included in the drone, and we'll start talking about some of those features that you guys all want to know about. So let's get started. Now the first thing you're going to notice is that DJI packs the Phantom 4 in somewhat of a shipping case that can be used as a carrying case. It's got a lock on it. You simply flip it out and twist it, and there you go. You've got a nice case. Now, is this something you're going to throw on an airline in the baggage compartment? No. Is it something that's going to last years and years? No. It's not waterproof. It's not dustproof. But it's a really nice touch when you've paid what you've paid for the Phantom 4 to know that right out of the box you can essentially start flying and carry it with you wherever you go. So it's a really nice feature. Inside of the case, you're going to have your Phantom 4. Go ahead and pull that out here. You're going to have your controller. You're going to have two sets of props, and you're going to have one battery. Now we actually have a second battery in here, so right out of the box you have a spot to put a spare battery. But we'll go ahead and take out the battery that comes with it. It's a very tight fit in there. You're also going to have your manual. You're going to have some cables and some other things. You guys know how all that works. And you're going to have your props, of course. We'll go ahead and take the props out. You do get a full extra set of props in the typical DJI bag. It's included in the case, and your quick start manuals. One thing they don't give you is an Apple cable. I still don't know why they do that when all their apps are really built around the Apple products like the iPad and the iPhone 6 and things that people usually use. They do give you cables for Android, and there's a new cable included in here. I'll have to find it. There it is. And this is the update cable, and essentially what that is an OTG cable with a USB female port on it. We're going to get into how you use that in just a second. So we'll go ahead and set this aside. Now, first impressions right out of the box. It's a nice looking machine. I mean, they really outdid themselves. The finish is more of a glossy finish. They've changed the shape of the arms to give it a more rigid arm strength to it, more of a kind of an octagon or a diamond shape to the arms, which gives it more rigidity. The motors are taller, and we'll talk about why they did a taller motor, and that basically has to do with when you're in forward flight or fast forward flight in, let's say, like the sport mode. That keeps those props a little bit higher up so that when you dip forward, they're not down here in the way of the shot. And we'll give you some examples of that later. They also upgraded the gimbal, and then they put all of the guts to the gimbal inside of the copter, so they're a little bit more streamlined. And I'm pretty sure they beefed up the cushioning. They don't have the four balls, the cushioning balls like they do on the Phantom 3 and earlier. Everything is inside, and it's up inside of here. The gimbal lock straps onto the bottom, and then it pulls off of the bottom of the gimbal. It also provides a lens cover, and that gives your gimbal lots of protection when it's in the case. The battery, of course, is much larger now. This particular battery is a 5350 milliamp 15.2 volt battery. It's a lot wider, but it's a little bit shorter. So the overall weight of it is pretty close to the original. The one thing that they did change is the connector. There's kind of a universal connector on the bottom. And although the battery does have to be inserted into the copter one way because there's more material on the top than the bottom, when you go to charge it, there's really no right or wrong way to plug in the charger, and we'll show you that when we get to charging. So you simply just insert it, click, and the battery is in. They did upgrade the props again. Now we know originally we had nuts on the Phantom 1, then we had self-tightening on the Phantom 2 and 3, and now with the Phantom 4 we have more something more similar to what's on the Inspire, which is a press and twist fit. Again, anytime you're doing any of the props, and especially we saw a lot of complaints about the Phantom 3 and the fact that, you know, guys were having cracks down here around the old motor mounts. A lot of that's because guys are cranking them on and then they go to take the props off and maybe they twist it the wrong way and they twist it the correct way afterwards. That's causing a lot of stress on those bolts, and that's to be expected, that when you have all that motor mounted there and you're cranking around on that motor trying to get your props off, you're going to put a lot of stress on that. They fixed that on the Phantom 4. I think we're not going to see those cracks, mainly because the plastic is more rigid and the mounting hardware is different, as well as the props. Now you get two types of props. You have a prop with a silver stripe and a prop with a black stripe. The prop with the black stripe goes on the motors with the white motor mounts with the black tips on them. So it's simply set it over the top, set it down, and give it a twist until it stops. The silver ones are going to go on just the opposite, down, twist, and lock. And again, and it's this quick. And we've seen even people on the forums wondering, well, how do I get these props off? They don't come off. You have to push down and follow the little symbol on the props to know which way you unlock or lock it. But make sure they're on there, give them a little twist, know that you've engaged a locking mechanism. That is a fully assembled Phantom 4. The Phantom 4 radio is very similar to the Phantom 3 and Inspire radios. It's exactly the same, actually. They did a couple upgrades. One is they put a metal bracket on here. We know we had some problems with the Phantom 3 and it was wobbly. They've upgraded that to the aluminum. It does appear to have a little bit more of a glossy finish like the Phantom 4. The big difference comes when you get into the switches on top. We still have the traditional start and stop your video here, and we have your start and stop or take pictures here. But what they did away with was the play button where you could play back your videos. That now has to be done through the Go app. What they've replaced the playback button with is a pause button. So if you're using any of the new smart modes, the active track, or anything where the copter is in autonomous flight, and you decide that, whoa, I need to stop that, you can just boom and you hit it and it's stopped. You can also do that by taking it out of whatever mode you're in and switching it back. We've also added the addition of sport mode now, which we'll talk a little bit later when we go into the flight characteristics of flying it. But other than that, the radio is the same. You have your traditional buttons back here that allow you to program, you know, your favorite things that you like to do, camera settings, battery mode, whatever that may be. And you have your dial wheel for tilt. This dial wheel, unlike on the Phantom 3 where you could hit the play button and actually scroll through your videos, this is now basically a camera setting button. So if it's your iris you want to adjust, things like that, shutter speed, you can do that here. Other than that, traditional return to home button and your power button, and it recharges the same with your typical charger. All right, now let's talk about some of the really cool features in the Phantom 4. Besides a really cleaned up look to it, new motors and prop design, they've done some really amazing things with the internals, not only on the gimbal, but the externals as well. One of them being these two guys right here. Now these are stereoscopic cameras that actually work as collision avoidance. Now we've heard a lot of companies talking about collision avoidance. Unique was one. There's a lot of other manufacturers out there that are doing some type of collision avoidance, or electronic e-bumpers they call them. But again, bam, DJI knocked it out of the park again with this one. These, if it's enabled, and we're going to go through that in the Go app, if you have the collision avoidance enabled and you're flying along in the GPS mode, if this senses anything in front of the copter and it goes out to, I believe, about 45 feet, it's kind of like a rear camera, a backup camera. You start to get a warning, it starts out green, then it's yellow, then it's red, then you get a beep, and then the copter will actually stop and will not fly into that subject. Now, it's not going to work with small things like power lines and even some small twig trees. We've tested it out. It definitely works on solid objects like vehicles and walls and houses and trees that have thicker branches. The big thing is, again, guys, it's another safety. It's an added safety measure. It's not something to go, hey, I want to go see if I can run into something with my $1,500 quad. It's an added safety feature. DJI keeps trying to make these things safer for you guys. because as we know in this industry, more and more beginners are getting into the industry and they want to fly the safest possible quadcopter on the market. Now, along with the stereoscopic vision on the front of the copter, they've also added on the bottom here a second optical flow camera, and this is basically a camera as well. They used to have the 2 sonar sensors and a 1 optical flow. Now they have dual optical flow, and why that's important is because anytime you're flying in an area where maybe you don't have GPS, maybe indoors in a large warehouse or a factory, where you don't have GPS, the copter is going to drift around. But with the vision positioning system on the bottom, or the optical flow sensors, they're taking a video of the ground, and if they see any changes in that video, they're going to correct for you. And what having 2 sensors does is it takes it from about 9 feet max on the Phantom 3 to up to 30 feet on the Phantom 4, so you've got a lot more room to play with there. It also helps in landing in both the auto and takeoff modes because it's another visual aid to help sense when the ground is coming up. The sonar on the bottom is essentially sending out a sonar sound to bounce off and reflect back. So the combination of the sonar sensors and the optical flow cameras is how you get smooth landings and allows you to fly indoors over a smooth surface without GPS. Now again, if you're flying over, funny textures like tall grass, sand, things like that, that can be difficult for any optical camera to pick up. But typically cement floors, if they have lines on them, or the crack lines, anything that has some kind of a reference point, the copter will actually track those and maintain position. Along with the new sensors, they've also beefed up the gimbal. We have dual-sided gimbal mount now. The camera specs are pretty close to the same. It does have some pretty amazing specs, and we'll put those in a link below and on the screen right now. They did mount the SD card and the micro SD cable, the micro cable on the outside here for programming and access to the SD card. And again, they put all those guts up inside of the copter rather than have them all hang down out here and exposed. The battery, of course, we've talked about that. They say 28 minutes. We know you're not getting 28 minutes with that. Probably closer to the 18 to 22 mark. Again, if you're flying down to the 30% cutoff mark, which most of you should be doing, when you get that first warning at 30%, you really should be working your way back home. And then when you get to 10%, that's your critical low battery. That's where it's going to go into auto land. And you don't want to be out over water, overpopulated area, or a house when you go into 10%. So we recommend, that 30% to 10% range where you should be landing. So if you take that into consideration, you're really only flying this battery to 70%. Maybe 80% of its capacity. So the 22-minute mark, that would be 28-minute mark would be, laboratory, perfect hover, not doing anything. You're not going to get that. If there's any kind of wind, if you're flying it down to those safety margins, you're really going to get about 22 minutes safely of flying, 18 to 20 minutes. Again, they raised the props and the motors are taller, and this gives you a better forward flight. So when that camera is pointing out at level, your props are now higher so that they're going to be easier to avoid getting the props in the shot. Again, we'll talk about the sport mode here in a minute. I would call that a very advanced mode. When you compare it to the Phantom 3 out of the box, the GPS mode was actually pretty quick. But yet you could let off the sticks and get that instant hover. I've noticed that with the Phantom 4 in the GPS mode, it flies a little bit slower than the Phantom 3. Same controllability and same position hold when you let off the sticks. But when you switch to sport mode, it's like a rocket ship. And I would definitely not recommend that for any beginner because it is way too fast. And even for professionals, unless you're chasing racing boats or race cars, you're probably not going to need to fly 50 miles an hour with your Phantom 4. It's a neat feature. You'll do it once or twice and you'll probably switch back to GPS mode. The other big thing on the inside of the Phantom 4 is dual IMUs, and that is the inertial measurement unit. That's the device that keeps copters level, and the fact that they have dual IMUs and dual compasses should add an extra layer of safety margin to the Phantom 4 for those who are concerned about flyaways and things like that. We have our own opinion on flyaways. Again, regardless if you have dual IMUs, single IMUs, or the very first flight controller on the market, you need to do an IMU calibration, you need to do a compass calibration, and you should do the compass calibration, you know, somewhat often when you travel around with your copter, or if it's been in contact with anything magnetic, like tools, a speaker in your trunk, the airlines, you know, throwing it on a conveyor belt, things like that. These are all things that can throw the compasses off. And if you're worried about flyaways, you want to make sure and have your own maintenance schedule and actually go through some of those calibration methods that we're going to go into the Go app here right next. So that's a brief overview of the sensors, the upgraded items. Other than that, we have a Phantom 3 here to compare it to. And the Phantom 3, still an awesome copter, is really about the same size. You've got basically a different finish. You've got the same size, about the same flight time. The big differences, again, are in those gimbals down below and the addition of the optical sensors as well as the dual IMUs in the Phantom 4. Other than that, if you just want to get a 4K camera in the air and your budget is limited, there is absolutely nothing wrong with the Phantom 4 Professional. This is an awesome machine. We still fly it every day. If you got to have the latest, greatest, and you want the optical avoidance sensors and a slightly higher flight time and some of those things, you may want to go with the Phantom 4. But again, both great copters. Obviously a lower price with the Phantom 3. So let's get into the DJI Go app. We're going to show you a couple changes, including the firmware update, which we love. Totally different than how you do it on the Phantom 3, and the Inspire, which is the method of putting the firmware update on an SD card and sticking in the slot and wondering when is this copter going to get done updating. They've taken that mystery away with the Phantom 4 with the addition of this new cable here. We're going to go into how that works right now. Now, one of the first things you're going to have to do with your Phantom 4 when you get it out of the box is check for updates and do the updates. Now, DJI has updated one of the items to where it's completely done on Wi-Fi, and that is the actual Go app and the updating of the RC. If you remember, if you had a Phantom 3 or the first Inspire, you used to have to put a SD stick in the back with the firmware on it. They've now eliminated that, and you can now do that using the Go app and the cable that's already connected to your radio. So when you go into the top where it says either safe to fly or ready to fly, and under firmware, you're going to notice that it may say your RC needs to be upgraded. Now, as long as your mobile device, whether that be your tablet or phone, is on Wi-Fi, the update will be able to be downloaded from the DJI site, and once the update is downloaded, you can simply do start the upgrade to the RC, and it's all done through the cable here. Your radio will beep, and the LED will turn blue. Once the RC is updated, it'll tell you on the screen that it's updated, and you restart the RC, and the RC is done. Now, let's jump to the copter. Now, previous to the Phantom 4, the way you updated the copter, and this is the same on the Phantom 3 and the Inspire, is you took the SD card, the micro SD card, out of the camera, you took it to your computer, you put the latest firmware in the root directory of the card, then you brought the card back to the camera, you left your radio off, you turned on the copter, and you waited for a series of beeps and dings and lights flashing. And it may take 5 minutes, it may take 20 minutes, nobody really knew. A lot of people were stopping the update in the middle because they thought it was done, only to find out that it didn't work. Some people were having trouble with the firmware not uploading. So what DJI has done now is they've included this small cable, and it's basically a USB connector on one end and an OTG cable on the other end. And what that allows you to do is when you want to do the update, or if your app indicates that there's an update for the copter, you're going to take this cable and you're going to insert that into the left side of the copter. You're then going to remove the large end of the USB cable from your radio, leaving it into the tablet or mobile device, which again is on Wi-Fi or connected to your network. You're then going to plug this in directly to the copter. The copter will be recognized. The update will automatically download, and it gives you a progress bar, which is great because before we were waiting on beeps. Now we actually see the percentage going across. Once the update's complete, the on-screen menu will tell you it's complete. Restart the copter, you restart, everything's good to go. So if there's any updates for the camera or the copter, that's all going to be done directly through the cable now. There's no more putting it on an SD card and wondering if it worked or if you formatted the card correctly. So they've really stepped it up as far as doing firmware upgrades, both for the radio, which is completely done automatically through the cable connected directly, and using the new cable, plugging it directly into your Phantom 4 and doing your update that way. So big improvement there. And we're now going to move on to getting out and flying this guy. We're going to take it outside. We're going to show you the sport mode. We're going to show you GPS, the collision avoidance. We're going to show you the active track and some of the other autonomous modes. And let's go out and get flying. Now sometimes you get out and you find a really nice place to take off from, nice smooth surface, and then you notice that your DJI Go app says that you need to move the aircraft, or there's a compass calibration that's needed. Now that can happen. Now maybe you already did a compass calibration just 5 minutes ago, but we're sitting here on smooth concrete, and right under concrete is usually rebar and cement and sand and everything else, but the rebar that's inside of there is causing some interference with your compass. So it's as simple as either move it to a new location on the concrete, or even better yet, take it off the concrete and move it to a grassy area where you know there's no rebar under it, and then your compass will show that it's all good to go and you're ready to fly.
The home point has been updated. Take off.
So now in GPS mode, it's very stable, very smooth, and even with full deflection, the copter doesn't travel that fast. And that's full forward flight right there in GPS mode. Okay, now we'll come back. Now in sport mode, the collision avoidance is turned off, so you're not going to have that collision avoidance, and the copter travels a lot faster. Wow. Now to set up your obstacle avoidance sensors for the first time, you're going to want to go into the main menu item. And then under the main menu item, you're going to see a new icon here that looks kind of like a signal strength bar. That's your sensor bar. And the nice thing that DJI did here is they actually gave you a description of what everything is. So the first thing right out of the box is, do you want to turn on forward obstacle sensing system, yes or no? So if it's off, it's going to be off. You're going to go ahead and turn that on, and then you're going to have the front sensors on. After that, there's some options. So not only do you have the obstacle sensing turned on, but you can also turn it on or off for when you're using the tap fly function, which we're going to show you in the outside demo, and the active track. Now, one thing with the active track is that if you have this enabled, it says right here, if activated, aircraft will automatically fly backwards if a subject being tracked is moving towards it. So if you walk up and put your hand in front of it, the Phantom 4 is going to move backwards, and since there's no sensors on the back, you could potentially run into a fence or a tree. So I don't particularly have that on mine, but if you want that, you could enable that there. Enable obstacle avoidance for when you're using active track. So let's say you're tracking somebody on the ground, but you fly towards a tree and there's a tree there. Do you want the copter to actually avoid that horizontally, yes or no? If you have that turned on, it will sidestep left or right to avoid it. If you have it turned off, it'll just slow to a stop and not move anywhere. And then the tap fly is for allowing horizontal obstacle avoidance. Again, if you've done that dot on the screen and you want it to fly to a location, while it's flying there, do you want it to fly around obstacles or just stop? And if you have it enabled, you're going to fly around the obstacles. And that pretty much covers how you set up and change the settings for your visual navigation system. Now with the collision avoidance on, the copter will sense and avoid obstacles. Now we have a building here in front of us, and you can hear the app has now triggered the alarm, and even with full stick deflection, we cannot move forward. So we must either raise up and go around this obstacle or turn around and go the other way. Okay, the obstacle has been avoided. I could now proceed on. Now, one of the really great features of the P4 was the addition of a mode called Active Track. And you simply touch Active Track, and then you're going to draw a small square around your subject. As long as the camera picks it up, you'll get the green box, you'll hit go, and then the copter will now follow that subject. And it does this completely hands-free. Now this differs from follow me mode, because in follow me mode, the copter is tracking the radio, which has a GPS in it. This mode, it's actually tracking the subject walking and will stay on that subject the entire time. Even though he has turned around, the copter is now going to track him both with the camera tilt and the direction of the copter. Now, one area where you may have trouble using the active track is in a high contrast situation. Sometimes if you have a very bright background or a dark subject on a dark background, you'll have a hard time getting that in the shot. Let's see how it works here. So far it's doing pretty good tracking him. No problems there, even with the tilt down. And we have our camera rolling. We also have, if any time you want to cancel any of these active modes, the active track or any of the autonomous flight, you can either hit the stop button or you can hit the pause button, which we covered earlier in the video. Now you see it's back to tracking, and do you want to track the subject? Now he's out of range. So there is some limitations to the active track. Range being one of them, high contrast situations. You can see now he's pretty far away, but once you have caught up to the subject, once you're kind of locked on, you can then retrack the subject and start over again. And there we go. And then he's moving on us there. There we go. And we're back tracking him. He's walking directly under it. The camera is not only rotating down to catch him, but the copter is yawing and rotating around to follow him. And now we have him perfectly in view, and the copter is tracking him. So that's one of the really cool modes. The next one we're going to cover is a pretty generic mode, but it's one that can be used to capture some really neat shots, and that's one that's called tap fly. Now let's say you want to get that really cinematic shot here. We want to maybe catch a shot of this lake here, and we want to get a really neat climbing shot, maybe climbing up through the trees. So what this shot and this mode allows us to do is simply pick an area in space to record, and the copter will fly to that position. So we're going to go to tap fly. We're going to go ahead and start our recording, and we're going to pick an area right there. And when we like that area, we just say go, and the copter proceeds to follow the dot that we put and give us this nice cinematic shot as it flies through there. You can see the collision avoidance started to pick up that twig a little bit there, but we were clear of it, so we're continuing on. And again, this can give you that really smooth shot, especially if you have to get through a narrow area or something to that effect. All right, guys, well, I hope you enjoyed the Phantom 4 review and demo. And make sure you get out there and like and subscribe our videos. Also, if you have a comment or question, leave it down in the comments below. We'll also put an email address there. You can contact us if you have questions. Get out, fly safe, and blue skies.